right. What's going on, Laura? How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great.
Good.
It's, last part of the year, we've almost made it.
I
It's,
know, it's
like
crazy, isn't it?
it is crazy. I actually just found out this week that next week is Christmas. So that's a
Same.
surprise.
Yeah, and I don't know where it came from. Yeah,
No,
mad.
you're right. And so I'm in Texas, and the weather here has been like really warm, so it doesn't feel like Christmas. So I think that kind of
Same here.
throws me off too. Yeah, I know you were saying that it was a little bit, yeah, it's a
Yeah,
little
it's quite mild in the
unusual.
UK at the moment. So it's really odd because usually, we would expect snow or something, but no, it's still quite, I say warm. It's not boiling, but
Well, I was gonna
yeah,
say compared
it's
to
warmer than
Texas, it's probably a
usual.
little, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So over the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, you've been kind of a little busy with different. You've got the Walk Me tour that you were on.
Yeah.
You had the Gardeners Reimagine HR
Yes.
event. I think that was
Yeah.
about what 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. Around October time.
okay,
Yeah.
you're pretty involved in both of those events, other events around the kind of the DAP area, right? The digital
Yeah.
adoption platforms. Tell me a little bit about your professional journey. I mean, you've been at 2E 7 years now,
Yes, that's
and
right. Yeah.
since then you become recognized as the top 100 DAP, which
I
that's
know.
pretty
It's
cool,
mad, isn't
right?
it? It's
Like
pretty
that's
cool,
crazy,
but
right?
it's
Yeah, it
mad.
is cool. It is
Yeah.
cool. So I don't know. Tell me, kind of walk me through that journey. Tell me a little bit about your experiences over the last 7 years with that.
Yeah, sure. So it's quite an interesting one because with TUI being a travel company, it's been quite an interesting time over the last few years, particularly the last sort of 4 years or so. So when I joined the business, they were going through, well, they still are going through an implementation of success factors. When I joined, they were 12 months in, launching the first module, which for us was performance. Everyone kind of picks their own. Ours was performance because it was the kind of one global process that we have. And I joined as the trainer. So they needed a trainer to, enable all of our end users to actually use the system.
Yeah,
And, at that point in time, we hadn't heard of DAP. It wasn't a particularly well known thing at that point. And we were using all of those traditional training methods that you do, like user guides, e learnings, videos, quick reference guides, all those sorts of things. But this was kind of the first project I'd been on where it was just me as the trainer. And we, at the time, had 71,000 employees. Then I have to make sure I can use this system that we're going to be using. And
no pressure, right?
no pressure, right? So like doddle done. But yeah, no, it was a really kind of, if you think about it too much, it's super stressful. But when you're like,
Right.
it's like, okay, this is fine. And it was all fine and dandy when we were doing the first module because it was just one thing to think about. We weren't doing many changes, and it was like, oh, this is going to be a breeze. And then we started with the second module, we started working on recruiting, and suddenly the penny drops that actually it's just me. And when
Yeah.
things change, there's only me that can change it. And all of this training material that we've got, and we'd spent so much time on an e-learning. And then I suddenly went one day, why are we doing e-learning? No one looks at e-learning when it's systems training.
Yeah.
And it was at that point where I was traveling all over the world, which sounds wonderful. And it is, but it's also, when you get to that stage where you can't remember what you're training when you get there because you're mixing two modules up, oh.
Yeah.
And I remember being in the office with my manager at Gatwick. We both just come back from the same trip, delivering training. We both sat there like, there has to be an easier way to do this because like traditional training methods, they work, but in a systems landscape, not all of them actually do. When you think
Yeah.
about it, we do
Yeah.
them because that's what we know.
Sure.
But we were both just sitting there going, this is bonkers. I can't keep up with all the changes that are happening in one when I'm training the next. And I always remember this conversation. It was just the two of us left at the end of the day, just chatting. And he said, oh, I saw this thing on Instagram called Walk Me, and maybe we
Yeah.
should look at something like that just to make it a little bit easier. And then here we are 4 years later. And
Yeah.
to be really honest, it's taken me down a career path that I never knew I wanted to be in. And I
Yeah.
I love it. And I feel so lucky that I get to do this every day. Like my job is to make people's work look nice. How cool is that?
Yeah, that's
Um,
very awesome.
and it's taught me all these things that I never knew I needed to know, and it's
Yeah,
completely changed my perception and mindset on how we train people and how we enable people with systems. Now I'm a complete convert. I was always about user guides. I wasn't great with e-learnings. Like I can build them, but I don't like doing them myself.
sure.
But now
That's
I'm
funny
like,
you
but
say that
like,
because, like,
yeah,
typically people like don't actually like doing them, but it's interesting
no,
to see that you're one making them and you don't like doing
no,
them half the time,
I
right? Like
don't learn
it's
with them. It's so
yeah,
naughty and it's so bad. I'll be the one that clicks through just to get the certificate and go, yeah, yeah, I did it.
right. Yeah, I mean, but that's kind of just natural, right? And
Yeah.
we'll get kind of into this a little bit later too, because I think that there's some interesting things. I had some other people on my podcast recently. They're into kind of just in time e-learning when it comes to VR and
Mm,
manufacturing space, and I think the same thing actually is true that it doesn't matter if you're looking at a machine and you're trying to work in a manufacturing facility, or
yeah.
you're behind a computer and you have to learn a software.
Yeah.
It's all the same things, and
Hmm.
people don't want to learn something until they need it. And so I think that's
That's
always really
exactly it.
interesting.
Yeah.
So I know WalkMe is as a company that's dramatically changed the
Mm,
trading space in general, not just within companies, but I mean the actual space itself
mm,
has been changed. We'll discuss a little bit more, like I said, about around the uh, WalkMe in general, and exactly how that's actually worked and benefited you and TUI. But before that, I'd like to kind of set the stage with going back to the basics of problem solving.
mm.
What are some of the major challenges that companies face when it comes to training and when it comes to trying to adopt change in a software or system approach?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one because I'm going through this at the moment with a project that we're still
Okay,
working on. It's one of
sure,
our last implementations of success factors, and it's a
gotcha.
really challenging piece. And I think the managing change within the organisation is one of those things that is not thought about early on enough in a project when it comes to an
Yeah,
implementation. It's like that thing at the end that everyone goes, "Oh yeah, probably should have done something about that."
yeah,
And it's like training as well. These two things kind of they do come together and they do work really well together. And one of the for us there were some really clear problems, and I've seen this in other organizations I've worked in as well. And it goes back to your point on on time knowledge and assistance.
sure.
Within the performance module that we were launching, we only need employees to go in 3 times a year, but we're training them at the time of year that they're not going to go in. So
Hmm.
it's all well and good offering that traditional training method, but they're not going to look at it. They're not going to go in. And that was one of our big problems was, how do we actually get them support when they need it, not when I've got
Yeah,
time to actually give them that support. And then when it comes to implementing a system or implementing anything that you're doing, I think for me it's about what's in it for them. It sometimes is as simple as that: is what is in it for you? Why should you spend your time and energy in using this piece of content or this piece of software or do this e-learning? Because what are you going to get out of it? And if you can identify those really clear almost selling points for
sure.
and that's what I'm currently working on now is, why are we changing your core HR system? Well, we're changing it because actually it's our global platform, and it means as a manager working with a global team, you're going to use the same thing for everything you do. And I know it's kind of stating the obvious, but sometimes people need that because all of us are uncomfortable with change, no matter what we're doing, no
Yeah,
matter what it could be. I mean, I've just moved house, and that's uncomfortable for me because it's a new surrounding. So it's all, we're not naturally
yeah,
comfortable with it. But I think if you can find what those benefits are, and if you can, you know, educate at the time in which it's needed, it can really get rid of some of those problems that you've actually got. So then when it comes to things like process is not working or things need to be improved, you've got that buy-in where people will support you and they will tell you what they need or will give you advice on what you can do to make it better, which is ultimately what all of us want and need.
yeah,
So I think
absolutely.
that was for me some of the two big things that we noticed. And in this new project that I'm on, change and enablement are two things that we've picked up instantly, because we need to know who our stakeholders are. We need to know, what is changing for them, but what's in it for them at the same time. So we recognize, yes, we know it's going to be hard, but this is what the end result will be, and it will be a journey. I think it's being really honest and open about that. Let's not
Yeah.
sugarcoat it. It's going to be tough, but
Yeah.
in the long
That's so
run, this
important.
is what it will be. And I think that we shouldn't
Yeah.
sugarcoat these things. We shouldn't lie. We know it's hard. And I think the
Yeah.
more we are open about that, the more people are like, okay, fair enough. I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I think people see through that, right? I mean,
Oh,
the
totally.
the idea that they don't is just bonkers to me.
Yeah.
And I think that there's also, you talked about, people being comfortable, and the reason they don't want to change is because they don't want to not be comfortable.
Yeah.
But I think that what you are able to, if you're able to understand certainty, people really just want
Yes.
certainty. Comfort
Yep.
and certainty are together, right? And so if you can create something that is uncomfortable, but you have certainty, then
Mm.
in a way you actually can create comfort in the new space.
Yeah.
And I think that when you have, systems that are in place that says we have a plan, we know why we're doing, and this is how we're going to do it. And oh, by the way, this is your piece. This is why
Yeah.
you're important to this. And when change happens, through somebody as opposed to them, I think it becomes such a different conversation. And now they're leading it as
Different.
opposed to being, dragged
You're
through
having this and
everything.
that's it. Yeah. And,
So you have to get
and
there.
part of
Yeah.
it is you do have to use this, but we're not going to say that. We're going to actually
Right.
involve you from the beginning, because if we do that, and we did a similar implementation last year for our colleagues in Germany, and we have some of our legal entity reps who are so heavily invested in the change, in the promotion of the change. And I speak to them every fortnight, and we look at, what are people struggling with and what can we do to make it easier. And those legal entity reps, they are so positive and they are so invested
Yeah.
in, you know, we launched this a year ago for them, but they're still wanting to drive this change and look at continuous improvement. But I think that is because we invested a lot of time in them up front to go, this is going to be tough. It's going to
Sure.
be uncomfortable, but we need your expertise as well as you need ours. And together we can get through the whole thing together, and we'll keep working together.
Yeah.
Because all of us have the same goal. We all want our end users to be able to use the system, find it easy, complete what they need to do, and then get on with their day. That's all
Yeah.
any of us want to do.
Absolutely.
And when you find, and when you do embed that change and you do get that buy-in, gosh, it makes your life easier.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And you've got a
And
sparing partner as well to
you do.
check ideas with, and it's
You
great.
do. Yeah. So one of the things that I think is obviously affected every company in the world, with COVID, and I think that you're starting to see companies starting coming back to the office. You have some understanding of, I think it was it Spotify that came out and said, we employ adults. We can let them work from home.
Yeah.
And that was a really interesting, because
Yeah.
it depends. I think that every company has to understand who they want to be,
Mm.
what they want to do, and what type of message they want to send, all their employees, but as well as the world of like, this is the type of company we are.
Yeah.
I think there are benefits. Don't get me wrong. I think there are definitely, not every company or every job or every role are created equal.
Yeah.
So there are areas and roles that I think, in my mind, to be the most efficient, most productive, highest performing person in that role, you need to be maybe in office or
Yeah.
at a facility.
Agree.
Whereas there are many roles that do not need to be in the office. And I think
Yeah.
that you can adjust for that. From a training perspective, and from the adoption and the rollouts that you've experienced and are still going through, have you had, like, tell me a little bit about the remote side of things? I know you were working with a global company, so there's probably times where, regardless if you're remote or not, you're still technically kind of remote, right? Because you're still working with different
100%.
people. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're a travel company, so we
Yeah.
have people doing all kinds of jobs. We've got cabin crew and pilots. We've got reps in hotels and resorts. We're not a business where everybody is in a head office all the time.
Yeah.
And that's what was really interesting with our digital adoption journey, because as we were due to launch our DAP solution, the world went upside down and the world went crazy, and all of a sudden every project stopped within the business. And
Okay.
you know, a lot of us were on these various different schemes where you weren't allowed to work because the government was supporting financially and things. And I was one of those people. And then I was suddenly brought back. And one of the reasons was because suddenly everybody was at home. Nobody, you
Yeah.
know, we were a very office driven workforce. We had the opportunity to work from home, but the culture really was that everyone kind of came in most days and you'd have one day at home maybe. And in some of our business areas, it wasn't common at all to work from home. Everybody was in the office
Yeah.
every day. And then all of a sudden that's changed and that's gone and we're not
Hmm.
allowed to be there. And we kind of realized that we didn't really have a way of communicating with people centrally other than email. And that's great, but if like I don't know about you, my inbox is full all the time, and I have my own
Yeah.
little rule of no more than 10, and I can't follow it. So people are going
Yeah.
to
Good
lose
luck.
things. Yeah, I know, right? But people are going to lose things because we get so many emails, all of us,
Yeah.
and TUI sort of they were working towards becoming more digital, and you know, we moved from Skype to Teams. It was a huge excitement because some of us had desk phones still. You know, it was quite interesting how quickly the change suddenly had to happen. And even to this day, it's very rare that I will go into a location and train a room full of people. I couldn't tell you when I last did that, to be quite honest.
Okay.
Everything we
Okay.
do is virtual these days.
Sure.
I used to travel every single week to a location with a room full of people and we'd go through content
Yeah.
together. I now do it from home or wherever I happen to be at
Yeah.
that point in time. Um,
Do you miss it?
well, yes, I do. I think there is a lot to be said for human interaction when it comes to
Agreed.
delivering anything
Yeah.
and to learning. And I always remember when we were looking at Walk Me at the beginning and someone said, oh, you know, it'll get rid of the need for trainers. And I went, hang on a minute, that's my job. And I am so adamant that all of these solutions that people can use and have yeah, they're great, but it doesn't replace that human interaction that you can have, because there's
Yeah.
something really reassuring about having someone talking to you. And I think what is really difficult is trying to focus when you're on an online virtual meeting or session, because it's so easy to get distracted by anything that pops up and no one can see that you're doing it. Whereas
Sure.
when you were in a room with people, you could go, oh, no, no emails today. You know, that is really challenging. And at the beginning, it was super hard. But now I think people are, particularly with internally with us in TUI, self-development is a really huge thing. It's a really, really big thing. And it's, you know, people are enabled and to dictate their own development journey. And I think because there is so much emphasis on this internally, people actually do invest time and they do pay attention and they do engage with you when you're delivering sessions. But the kind of the difference now is that where I would be in, I think one of my last trips was to Belgium, and the
Okay.
office was in one of the hangars, and out the window you could see planes. You know, it was amazing.
That's
I would
awesome.
be there for, it was so cool. I'd be there for an
Yeah.
entire day talking about performance. Now I do it for an hour.
Yeah.
And some of that is, you know, because we're virtual now, and
Sure.
some of it is also because actually the DAP solution replaces a lot of that. And now what I'm noticing more and more is that I can focus more on the continuous improvement, and you know, the more technical things rather than just doing really basic stuff, because I have something that does that. Now I actually get to speak to my stakeholders and end users and really understand what they're doing more. And I think people seem to be more open with giving feedback now, and it's not a moaning feedback, it is a genuine, it would be so much easier if we could. And I think that culture has developed more and more over the last few years, and it could be pandemic related, it could be because our
I was going to
working
say, what do you
lives have
think
all
that's actually
changed.
changing that? Because I think that's awesome that that's actually
Mm,
happening. Are you
yeah,
able to identify why that's happening? Because I think that's a really good positive change. But
yeah.
what's triggering that? What's
I
causing
don't
the?
know whether I know for
Okay.
us and for me in the work that I do, it's so important to me and my colleagues in my team that we do get feedback, that we do something called
Yeah.
key user workshops, and we connect with all of our key stakeholders, and they could be HR, they can be recruiters, they could be
Okay.
learning admins, and we book an hour out of their diary and we just sit and talk to them, and we go through their wish list, and their wish lists can be anything. It could be something tiny, something big. But I think now people feel listened to because we have the time now to actually sit and listen to them and talk to
Oh,
them,
that's interesting.
and
Okay, yeah,
which we've never had before because we were
yeah,
traveling so much, and now we're not,
gotcha.
and we're at home. Diaries are a little bit easier to manage. It's really easy to work late, I've noticed, but it's also really easy to make more time for people, and
Sure.
I think that's so important, especially because
Yeah.
people are at home and they're not. I've got some colleagues in my team that they work from a location where there isn't an office. They can't go in every day.
Okay.
They don't even have the option. So for them, it's super difficult. And so many people are like that. And I think it's really important to connect with those people more and talk to them
Yeah.
more because they actually have gems. They just have no one to share it with. It's
Gotcha.
still really tough, though. I do feel for those people that don't have a choice.
Yeah. No, it makes sense.
Mm.
And going kind of back to your the feedback, and I think that those feedback loops, those constant loops are
Mm.
just critical to continuous improvement. My take is on software is specifically, it's always been, success of a project can be based on how much training is needed when
Mm-hmm.
it's deployed.
Yeah.
So I always feel like if the less training you need, the better the solution probably was designed to be.
Yeah.
And this, depending on, it could be a bot solution off the shelf. It could be a, proprietary build, but either way, I think those things still remain very, very much true, whether it's configurations, customizations.
Mm-hmm.
How do you approach the relationship between training needs and project success?
Ah. Yeah, that's an interesting one. So I'm with you on your side with, and me and my manager, we always talk about this. The system should be easy enough that you can just log in and do it. But we all know the
Right.
reality is
Yeah.
as soon as people get their hands on it and everyone starts telling you that, well, we used to be able to do this and now we do that, that
Yeah. Oh
famous
my
one,
gosh. Yes.
it's not as easy anymore. And we're very careful. So we actually, when we started the whole Success Factors project, we had these 10 commandments defined as a project
Okay.
team. And we shared these across all of our workshops with all of our stakeholders. And they were things like, we're not going to always focus on what we used to do. This is our once in a lifetime opportunity to actually think, what would make it easier? How could we
Hmm.
make it a bit easier? And we were very lucky that in most of the modules, our stakeholders really took that on, and they really
Oh,
took on
good.
the challenge of,
Yeah.
oh, I never get to do this. If this is going to be amazing. And with these stakeholders, I'll also spend a lot of time with them doing an actual training needs analysis for their modules. And what we'll sit and do is work out who are the key populations that are impacted by this. And actually,
Hmm.
what do they need to know? Because what we don't want to do is drown them with what they don't need, because that is when you'll lose everybody. So then
Yeah.
we really, really focused, and I really keep them involved in who needs to know something, what is it they need to know, and when do they need to know it, so that we can really focus on that. So that leaves then the project team to do all their configuration and their problem solving and things together, so that we don't blur that line between the two, because it can be so easy to be the person in the room that everyone goes, well, I don't like this system, so I'm not going to do it. You're like, well, and they go, I think it'd be better like this. Sure, but that's not
Yeah.
what we're talking about.
Well, and that just takes the entire room down too,
Oh,
right? And then now
instantly.
you're just having to fight that throughout that entire
Yeah.
training session or whatever it may be.
It's
Yeah.
and that's so difficult when it happens, because
Yeah.
you've really got to, and I always go in with this is not your wish list opportunity. These are who all of your key users are. This is who that needs to go to. And what we're always very
Hmm.
clear on is, we kind of have like a support model of, we have local champions that will support some of the bigger teams like our reps and hotel reps and things. Then we have key users that are usually within an administration role. Then it comes to us. So what we'll always try and say to people is, go to your champion, let them know what we'll take any idea. They'll then send it up the line to see how far it gets, because we could already have it and it's on its way. It could be that
Sure.
actually technically it can't happen, but we try not to blur the lines between training and project work. But like you say, the minute someone says it, everyone goes, oh, this is going to be rubbish. And you're like, no, it's not, I promise. So I always have a few little benefits tucked up my sleeve. So I call it my elevator pitch for
Okay.
when that happens, so I can go,
Okay.
oh, but I've got this.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting one. And I think you have to be super organized. You need to pull on all the knowledge that's in your own. Like, I'm very lucky that my team are full of certified SAP consultants, so they know the ins and outs of all their modules, so I can get every piece of information I need from them,
Yeah.
and I've got my key users, and I'm just in the middle trying to coordinate them all. So I'm kind of lucky in how we've set ourselves up that it works well.
Yeah. And are you involved in the process prior to the training? You mentioned about how, training really needs to be something that's thought of first, not last.
Mm-hmm.
Totally agree with that. I think there's a lot of things that actually can fall into. Um, there's factors that influence whether it's, it's a training, um, it's a training need,
Mm.
or it's just a complex solution. How do you adjust for that afterward? And are you in a place in your organization that allows you to be able to maybe nip those in the bud prior to that?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe just to succinctly say this, when things become a training issue, there's either they don't know what they don't know yet, and you're there to help them know that, or it's that they're not in the right mindset, or it's just a really complex software system and the design maybe did not entail everything that they're doing. And there's usually an alignment of miscommunication. Maybe there's a misalignment of business need
Mm.
versus desired outcome. How do you navigate that? And is there areas within your workflow that allow you to either take in consideration that and structure it again from design, or are you kind of always on the back end having to just be that intermediary between feedback and this is what I think that the
Mm.
business needs? Like, how does that actually work? I mean, I know it's kind of a little complex of a question the way I probably
No, no, it
worded
makes
it, but
total sense because
yeah.
it's such a common thing. And like we've touched on, training is the last thought. And
Right.
what I will always do is force myself into meetings. Whether I
Okay.
need to always be in them or not, I will go,
Sure.
because for me, it's having the context behind, what's going on in the different iterations. So we tend to go in 3 iterations in a UAT. For
Okay.
me, it's really interesting to understand at the different iterations where they're at and where they are starting to because we've just gone through iteration 2 of a project, and it's a point where they're starting to recognize where some complexities are coming up,
Mm-hmm.
which then means I already am on the front foot because I know that they're coming, and it gives me an opportunity to really start to think about how do we combat that in training, because we all know it's going to come.
Sure.
And I don't like being on the back foot with things, and none of us do it, but it happens and we know it does.
Yeah.
So I'll always try and force myself in, because the project teams themselves, they are in a position where not my team to say, but the like the business as usual teams, they only know what they know.
Sure.
So we're the ones educating them on what the system is going to be doing in the future. And it's as they're processing what's going on is when they realize, oh, hang on a minute, this is going to be really tricky, which is when I can go, right, okay, so maybe we can't fix something configuration wise with the system, but we could do something with our DAP solution instead that would support our users through that process and
Mm-hmm.
actually make it slightly easier for them. So I always try and just get in as many meetings as I can to try and understand a little bit more. It's difficult with capacity, but it's one
Yeah.
of the things I really try and do. And we've had projects in the past where I've come in midway through, and suddenly you kind of see how big the process map has become, and you start to see already that as an end user, that's going to be really tough to understand. And so I always like to do a lot of problem solving around how do we overcome this? And we maybe can't do it on day one, but we can at least say, we know this is not ideal
Yeah.
and we're going to work on it and we're going to make it better for you. And I think this is where DAP has really changed my way of thinking, because I would always be like, oh, okay, we'll do a video or we'll write a user guide. But now it's
Sure.
around like, right, so we've got this problem where we're moving from this system to that one. This one doesn't do what that one used to, and we need to somehow translate it in. Success factors can do so much, but what can I do in there to try and capture that person at the point in which I know they're going to get stuck and get them that information? And I'm starting, and in this project I'm in now, I already have these requirements in place, because they're thinking of it all the way through, because I keep going, oh, well, I could do something, so you try and just slide it in as much as I can, so that
Yeah.
they have that knowledge and awareness, and they almost know too much, because they now ask for very specific things, which is great.
Yeah, for sure.
But there have been times where I'm on the back foot and trying to problem solve on the spot, and trying to, some of it is around resistance to change, and it is maybe that a launch hasn't gone particularly well, or not enough enablement was done before I've joined the project. And I think there's a lot, it sounds really fluffy, but the hearts and minds piece is really important, to kind of go, I get
Yeah.
it. I'm listening to you, and I know it's difficult, but how can we together, let's try and sort this out, and let's find a way to make it easier, and I'll help you as much, and there's a lot of,
Yeah.
with this one of our groups, it's worked really well, that we've kind of gone, yeah, we hear you, we know
Yeah.
it's not good,
Yeah.
what can we do? And we're now going through a complete redesign, but it's
Yeah.
super challenging,
Yeah,
super
it's like
challenging.
empathy in training, right? I mean, you gotta keep those soft skills in mind.
Yeah, you do.
Training an adult is very different than teaching a child,
Yes. Yeah.
right? And I think that is one of the things. So I have an 8 and a 3-year-old. We homeschool, and one of the things I notice that when they are struggling with something, learning something new, versus an adult going through a process of either training or introducing some type of event, whether it's software or other additional process, is that kids don't seem to have a negative outlook on
Mm,
what they're learning. Right. It's interesting because I feel like when you're talking to a child and you ask them to do something, or you're teaching them to do something, they're very curious, and
yeah.
sometimes the most negative is just, this is hard, or I don't get it, or I'm having a hard time. But it's never well, we should do this, or this doesn't make sense. And it's
Mm,
always like, how do they look at it as a challenge? And I always think of there's a quote by Leonardo da Vinci. It says, learning never exhausts the mind. And I would actually challenge that quote, because I feel like sometimes it is very
yeah,
exhausting. But I
it
think
is.
when I started looking at that and kind of like spending some time with that, I kept on thinking, well, maybe it's not exhausting if we're
Mm,
actually learning. But I
mm,
think so many times we're actually fighting learning as
yes.
adults, right?
Yeah.
We don't want that change. We're resisting. And when it takes a lot more effort to resist something,
Yeah.
to pull, right, than it is to be pushed. And I think that through the innovation cycle, you see that bell curve, right? And so
Mm,
you have the innovators, you have the laggards, and what we're trying to do in the change management space, and I can say that we're because we are both in that change management space
yeah.
at the end of the
Yeah.
day, whether we're training, whether we're consulting, we're still in helping people make changes, and move forward in a process improvement way. I would be curious on, where you see some advantages or see some insights that you've had on how you're able to communicate properly with. And you mentioned a little bit about making sure that you're, you know, giving some truth to people. This
Mm,
is going to be hard. I get it. I'm on your side. I'm here to help you, not to hinder you. Let's go through this process together.
yeah.
How are you what are some insights maybe that you've had that you could share with us on, in regards to making sure that that is really understood in your teams, that it's not just
Mm,
to check the box, it's not just hearsay, it's not just because we're trying to do a good job, but it's actually because you
yeah.
care. How do you get that across?
Yeah. And that's so interesting, because during university, I did a dance degree, and I was teaching kids, and it was like, this is a dream. But this was primary school. Then I got to high school and went, this is awful. And I thought, I know, I'll teach adults. That'll
Oh
be
my
easy.
gosh.
Oh
Yeah.
God. And it's so interesting that you say that, because like one of our processes that I work on a lot is our performance process.
Yeah.
And everybody sees it as an admin task. And it's not an admin, but it's so hard to say, you have to fill this form in. And it's not
Yeah.
meant to be painful. It's
Yeah.
meant to be easy. And
Yeah.
all you've got to do is talk to your manager and the manager talk to you, and then you just write down what you've agreed, and that's it. It's so simple when you look at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so interesting. We've run the same process since I joined, so 7 years now. And every year it's the same process. And every year I have the same people with struggling and not understanding. And you just, part of you think, oh my God, am I talking
Right.
Chinese to people? What is, but
I know.
I get it. And then when I take a step back, I think, but hang on, you live and breathe this. They don't. They live and breathe their jobs. This just
Yeah.
happens to be my job.
So true.
And it's so easy to criticize and go, wow, you're just being daft because you should know this by now. But then I think, hang on a minute. I've got a regional sales manager for retail stores in a certain part of the world who is dealing with targets and people and HR, and
Mm-hmm.
this little process that I'm asking her to do is becoming the worst part of her day because she can't remember how to do it.
Yeah.
And for me, it's simple. For her, it's ruining her day.
There's a disruption, right? I mean, it's a
Yeah.
disruption for them,
And it's a
even if
tight
it's minute. Yeah.
deadline,
Yep.
and they know it impacts someone's salary or pay review. So it's really high pressure, but
Yeah.
it's so simple. And I think a lot of people build it up, and it's like that thing you do when you put something in the too hard basket and then you
Right.
finally have to get to it and go, oh, crikey. But then when you do it, it's never as bad as you thought it was
Yeah.
going
You're
to
like, oh,
be.
I should have done that,
I should
2 days
that was
ago.
easy. I should have done that ages ago. And it's that thing of like we're doing your homework the night before.
Sure.
It's,
Right.
and it's
Yeah.
so interesting when I say that to people. They're like, oh yeah, it is, isn't it? You're like, yeah, exactly. So let's try not to do that. But I know people will. And I'm always someone who's very open to, like, just ring me. If you're stuck, just call me.
Right.
It's 5 minutes out of my day. But if it makes your life easier, you just have to ring me.
Yeah.
And often in those moments you get, and it's not always, it's very difficult sometimes of year because we have so many people and it is just me. And I have another colleague now who manages the module. Between the two of us, we do an awful lot of one-on-one support. But
Okay.
that's where you get the really juicy bits of information from people, because they feel like you're really, it could just be that I've answered a Teams message and said, oh no, it's okay, you just press this. To them, it means the world. But me, it was
Yeah.
2 seconds just to type it. But I think that's something that's really important. And that's taken time, is building up trust between you and whoever your stakeholders might be. Because the more
Absolutely.
trust you have with them, and trust comes in, listening to what they're saying, helping them with their questions, not sending them back to a massive mailbox that, it could take a couple of days to get answered. And sometimes you do have to do that, but really trying to spend the time with them. And often I'll also say, well, hang on, why don't we get all of your managers together for 30 minutes on a call? We could just whip through the whole thing super quick. Or let's have a drop-in session. Anyone can join, and we'll literally look at all of your problems on that call for an hour together. And that's what we'll do.
Yeah.
And I think since we've done that, and myself and my colleague Christina have done that, we're now getting that feedback from people around, and it's not moaning, it is genuine. Do you know, it'd be so much easier if you did this? And we're both like, oh my God, yeah, of course it would. But you don't think, we're blinkered, you don't think about it. And so for me, trust is a massive thing, and it takes time and it takes energy. And at certain times of year, my team's chat is going mad with 100 questions, but it's worth it in the end, because you get gold from people when you get that from them.
I love that. No, it's so true too. So I want to take a little bit of a different approach here for a minute. So I know we talked about WalkMe, and we're obviously, WalkMe is a big part of it. There's a lot of people that don't know about WalkMe. I remember being introduced to WalkMe a few years ago and thought it was just the most amazing software, and could see the advantages and could see the use cases like crazy. I wanted to take a minute and just blow my mind with some of the things that excite you, and can maybe give some people that don't know about WalkMe a little bit more insights on what it does, why it is just an amazing platform. I understand that there's other alternatives out there and there's some other competitors, but WalkMe's done a great job of just being out in the market, being an advocate for change management adoption. And they've got some just great content out there too. I follow them.
Amazing.
I've been following them for years. It's great. So yeah, I just want to give you the floor for a minute. Just yeah,
Yeah.
blow my mind with some of this stuff.
Okay, I can. So just quickly,
Yeah.
walk me essentially, you lay it on top of your system, and what you can do is build. It's like a GPS. It's probably the easiest way to describe it. It's a GPS that you put on top of your system, and you can guide people through a process end to end. You can use some contextual guidance if you've got a certain field that you think is going to be confusing. You can push out notifications, and you can create little help launches everywhere. And now, I am not the most technical person in the world. I'll be really
Sure.
open.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
am a trainer by trade, and I can tell you what systems do. And if you ask me if someone does that, I'll go, yeah, sure. And I won't always know the answer. But walk me, every time I speak to them, my mind gets blown with what they come up with. And it's things I just think, how do these people come up with this stuff?
Yeah.
So,
And for people to just understand the it's overlays that happen. So if you were on a computer, say just for example, you're on a computer and you get to the start menu, you'd have an overlay that says, hey, start is here,
this.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, press
exactly.
is here. Yeah. So okay.
Yeah. And we have, and you've also got like a little menu in there. So
Yep.
ours is the TUI logo, and it's the TUI smile that it winks. So it's a GIF
Nice.
that's, and you press it and it opens up this lovely menu of content.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's really cool. And actually today I've had my at last Walk Me key user meeting of the year, and we've gone through all the numbers for the year, and seeing the usage is just incredible. And some things can be so simple. So we had a process where if someone is going to be in Germany, if someone's going to be off sick, they've got private insurance, they need to upload a medical certificate. If they don't upload it, HR have to go and chase them. So when we implemented this new time off system, they said to me, could we just put something in that says, like, if they've not uploaded something, that could they just, and it was so simple. We just put a little button if they'd forgotten to press upload that said, please make sure that you have uploaded your medical certificate. That one button has saved 500 hours of HR's chasing time.
Wow. That's
just
awesome.
one little button.
Yeah, it's one button.
And it's so simple. We've had a 40% increase in people completing the objective setting process on time just by looking at the shout out. We launched a new learning homepage for SuccessFactors this year, and it was a massive change. It's starting to look finally like the main system, and it was, for us internally, it was a really big change. And we've always struggled to get people into learning because it's a little bit hidden in the system. And in the last 2 months, that one of the shout outs and the walkthroughs that we've put through has had over 19,000 views. So there's so much more activity going on within the system because we're able to promote it better. And you can do things like you can create an invisible smart tips, as people don't necessarily know that they're using WalkMe because we've rebranded it so heavily that it looks like our branding.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So you're kind of tricking them in a way, but not in a negative way, not to
Yeah.
but just to try and make the whole thing easier. And for me, it's not just about HR. HR are a huge community, and they are our key users, and they are the people that push things out for us. But actually our employees and managers as well, it's super important. They're the ones I can't get to with face-to-face training. Being able to get to them via WalkMe is incredible. And recently we've embedded, so WalkMe is deployed via a browser extension, which is great if you've got one IT team. We don't have one IT team. We have multiple IT teams.
Sure.
So recently there's been an update where you can embed a snippet into the system. So now anybody who uses our URL for SuccessFactors, they instantly get WalkMe. So finally we've got it onto iPads. So we've got 6,000 more users now interacting with WalkMe.
Because they were just on iPads.
Because they were just on iPads. Our cabin crew, pilots, our hotel reps, they're not on laptops like we are. They are just on iPads. Gotcha. And they are now completing processes in a more timely manner. They are accessing all of our content. They're able to, get to the latest learning. They're getting to see all the latest updates that we've never been able to show them before.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest selling points for me is I am not someone who likes reporting. I am never in Excel. If you see me in it, you should probably ring someone because I'm probably not very well. I'm a PowerPoint girl through and through.
Okay.
But
which makes sense. I mean, training, right?
I'm a trainer. Totally I'm not an Excel trainer.
Yeah.
But the reporting in WalkMe is so incredible because not only can I see, actually, like a shout out, it's had 19,000 views. I can also see behind the scenes, and it success factors can't show me this, actually what our people are doing in the system.
I was going to say, does it track behavioral so that way you can
Yeah.
actually say, hey, look, you, because I always see that with the especially with project management teams, it's always a big
Mm.
thing, right? Because there's tons of, I think it was a study that I saw recently that said 25% of an application's features are used on average.
Yeah.
That means almost 80%
Yeah.
is not being used.
Which is
That
nuts.
is crazy. Yeah. And so
It's
and I totally
crazy.
get that there are going to be, okay, well, this group doesn't use this set of features, but this group uses this set of features. I get that. But
Yeah.
holistically, an average, it's 25%
And you're
that are
paying
actually being
for it
used.
as
You're paying
well.
for it
And that's
100%.
the crazy thing. Like, you're
Yeah.
paying
So if it tracks
licenses for all these
behavior,
things. Yeah.
yeah, so if it tracks behavior, are you able to then prompt them and say, hey, you should be able to do this, and give
Yeah.
them some tips on this will make your life easier?
Exactly. And
And
that
that's
helps.
happening through WalkMe?
Yes. And it
Okay.
lets us see a journey that we wouldn't be able to see otherwise.
Yeah.
So our performance process, again, our performance forms, we know it, they kick out a certain number of errors if you don't do something properly. But
Okay.
we don't know what the most common one is to be able to kind of go, right, let's do something. But the reporting and WalkMe allowed us to see the most common errors people were getting. It allowed us to see when people were going in and actually using the
Yeah.
forms. Were they all doing it on the last day? Yes, they were.
Of
We
course.
knew it, but we couldn't say it for sure.
Sure.
We didn't think they were using the comments boxes. Then you find out people spend 45 minutes writing comments. I would never have known that otherwise.
Okay.
We've got a mentoring process at the moment where we ask our mentees to actually speak to the mentors before they select them. We don't know if it's happening, but actually we can see with the system activity, there's a 5-hour gap between when they find the mentor to when they sign up, which we wouldn't know.
Sure.
And even little details like in a form, if we've put some links in, we don't know if people click them and they're taking up space.
Yeah.
So now we can look at our reporting and go, well, actually, no one presses that one. So let's just get rid of it and let's condense things a little bit
Yeah.
more. And all of
Yeah.
this is done without, and I don't know who is pressing the buttons, because I'm not allowed to see that information with our Works Council, but I don't need to see that information.
Yeah.
I'm interested on average what is going on. And with all of our upcoming projects, it really helps us to identify ahead of time how other countries have got on, so I can go in and say, well, this is what we did for them, but let's actually see what yours are doing.
Yeah.
And so it really helps me to be so
Absolutely.
much more proactive. And yeah, the reporting, it blows my mind every time I go in. It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Mm.
I think there's probably the algorithms that are being developed with the behavioral tracking that's happening, that's able to give the WalkMe app a completely different new life,
Yeah.
and different value. What is AI going to do for the training landscape, whether this is in WalkMe or just in general?
Yeah.
AI is disrupting obviously everything right now. And there's a lot
Mm.
of companies that don't even know what to do with AI.
Yeah.
I've told a lot of people that my whole thing is there's two kind of approaches that I take with AI. AI is an accelerator.
Mm-hmm.
Just like every technology, it just accelerates good, accelerates bad,
Yeah.
but it's accelerator. And two, it's also a tool. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
solution.
Yeah.
It's not the end state. AI is so many times being used as, hey, this is a solution. How can we use it? And I say it's I call it SOS,
Mm-hmm.
shiny object syndrome. And
Brilliant. I never heard
and
that one. That's
yeah, and
brilliant.
so it's this idea that we have solutions looking for problems, as
Yeah.
opposed to understanding the problem better, and then let's find a solution. Maybe that's AI, maybe that's a person. As
And this
crazy as
is,
that sounds,
yeah,
maybe
that's the
it
thing.
could be a
And
person.
it could be a person,
It
and
could
it's
be a
such an
person.
on-trend topic at the moment. And like for us, one of the things we have to be really careful of is that people are using the tools they're meant to be using and not the ones
Right,
that they're not meant to, because we have to be so careful with what answers are coming out, what people are
right.
putting into these bots that maybe could be releasing information that they shouldn't be. And
Yeah,
bots seem to be the big trend of that people want to focus on, and it's particularly internally. We have an AI work stream that are purely focused on what we do with AI internally, and I think it
Hmm.
will. It's so interesting seeing all the discussions and the use cases that people are coming up with, and you're like, I don't. Do you really need a chatbot to do that? Can't you just? What's the benefit? So I
Right.
think it's going to be really interesting to see what the future brings with it. And there is, I think, a lot of fear around it because it is the unknown, and we don't, people. It's
Sure.
always that thing, people worry about jobs when these new
Well,
technologies
and it
come
is
in.
it is displacing some jobs. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm in a lot of networking groups, and at least once every week I hear about someone being displaced by
Mm,
AI disruption within the workforce.
yeah.
And these are interesting because at the last 3 or 4 that I've had in contacts with, these are data scientists, these are
Mm,
finance accountants. So it's really interesting to see how that's being disrupted in an area that you typically think like, well, you still need people in those roles. They still need
yeah.
to be interacting,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of disruption. I think it's almost I'm trying to remember where I heard it from, but the idea was that when you're doing process improvement, so many times people feel like you're just improving the process, and what you really need to do is you need to rethink the process
Mm,
and then improve it.
yeah.
And sometimes that means taking things away,
Hmm.
and if you can take things away enough to where you have to put them back, then you know and understand the value that it's
Yeah.
created. And so I think what you're going to see is you're going to see, tech companies are doing this right now with the huge, massive layoffs that they're happening. We kind of
Mm,
over, what's I'm thinking of, they just overhire.
yeah.
And then they realize, oh, well, we hired too many
Hang
people.
on.
Let's lay a bunch of people off. And I think that once you actually understand, and you can actually use AI to understand your business better, because again, it's accelerating what you know, it's
Hmm.
accelerating good and bad. But if you can use it in a powerful way to understand your business better, now you
Yeah.
can actually make sure that you're hiring the right people in
Yeah.
the right roles, and then they can stay there longer. They could be, the retention could go up, the performance can go
Mm,
up, the capacity can go up. I mean, you're talking about, you're in a role that, you know, 10 years ago, you would say, well, there's probably 10 people that need to be in that role.
yeah.
And now today, you're able to successfully deploy amazing solutions, and it's a person of one,
Yeah.
or two, right? So I think it's just amazing some of the things that we're going to see, and
Yeah.
especially the next, year or two.
Agreed. It's 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 the unknown and it's scary, but it's also interesting too. I see a lot of work that WalkMe are doing actually with AI and with some of the functionality they've got. It's incredible what they're doing. But I think working in TUI for so long, I'm so conscious of the different unions, works councils that we have
Yeah,
to look after and what we're doing
sure.
with people's data. And I think that for me, that's the really unsettling side of things. But equally, I mean, we have some things internally that we use in there. So it doesn't speed up my day, but it changes my way of thinking. And
$100%.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see what does happen. Um, but I think you're right. There's always a place for humans in these. A chatbot is great, but actually speaking to a human is sometimes better because you get more experience, emotion, and yeah. So I think let's see,
Yeah.
let's see what
Yeah.
happens.
I agree. I think the let's see is a really good kind of
Yeah,
outlook. Yeah, because I think that everybody has their opinions, but it's like we don't know. I mean,
we don't
companies don't know
know.
what they're going to look like in 3 years. I
I'm
mean, we used to
open to
have
the
10-year
idea of
plans.
it. Let's,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. So I don't think, yes, it could impact me in the future. It probably will, but I'm interested to see how and why and what will go on, and
yeah,
particularly to see what TUI will do with it.
I love that.
Um,
Well, I know we're getting close to the end here. And as we
mhm,
wrap up, it's a good segue into the future. Curious on what tips you have, just as a kind of a final, words
mm,
of insights and value that you could give to people that are going through this journey right now. Organizations that could be at different ends. It could say, "Hey, look, we're doing all the traditional stuff, and it's just not working, and we're not
mm,
seeing results." Or, "Hey, we just started with a DAP system, and we really don't understand exactly what we're doing, but we know that we're on the right track." What are some tips? I mean, you
mm,
could pick how many tips, but what are maybe one or two things that are just, hey, if you can give this as a final, this would be one thing you can do as an organization to really help you be successful in that journey.
yeah.
What would it be?
I always have three because I could give loads, but I think of
Awesome.
my three.
Okay.
For me, the first thing is always identify the problem you're trying to solve. It could be one
Yeah.
problem. For me, there were four. But I really write down, I physically have mine on a piece of paper, what I was trying to solve, because it does have that, what was it, SOS, shiny
Yeah,
object
shiny
syndrome.
object
It does
syndrome.
have that
Yeah,
because it is cool,
for
it is
sure.
exciting, it is different. But you need to understand what it is you're trying to solve. So for me, it was the forgetting curve, it was in time training, things like that. Those are the things that I was trying to solve. Because if you can communicate that, you can then, you've got a good case already to start working with your tool. The second one for me is have an executive sponsor who backs you fully, because it's tough.
Yeah, so important.
It's a new thing. It's a little bit like AI. It's the unknown for some organizations. These solutions are still up and coming. You know, we've been with WalkMe for 4 years, but prior to that, I'd never heard of this before.
Yeah.
So, you know, make sure my director is an amazing sponsor for me. She backs me 100%. She knows what the tool does. She can tell you all about it, and she believes in it. And I think that's the biggest thing. So whenever I come across any hurdles, she is there. Same as my manager. They're both there and they know
Awesome.
what we want. And then my last one would be bold and be brave with what you're doing with your tool, because this is the time where, a bit like when you launch a new system, this is the time where you get to really do something different. And
Yes.
I know there's that line of think outside of the box, but actually do it. Think of where, like, I draw a lot of my things out, or I write my processes out, because you'll find that things are more complex than you realised. But can you do it in a fun way? Is there an opportunity to do a Christmas quiz walkthrough? Or is there, I don't know, are you doing a town hall that you can promote? You know, just think outside of the box in what you're trying to achieve, because when you're writing a user guide or doing a video, you don't get that opportunity. So I would say be really bold and brave, because the worst thing that can happen is you have to take it down. That's not the end of the world.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Doesn't matter. Just try.
Yeah.
Because it will completely change the way you think about what you're delivering. And it has for me. I could do more, but those would be my main three.
No, that's great.
Say.
No, that's great. Yeah. Great. Laura, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. This has been great. So I thank you so much, and happy holidays. I mean,
yeah, you too.
Yeah.
Next week.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
We best get organized.
All right. Take care. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye.